there was a mayor who said, like, the idea that I would require somebody to have space for their private vehicle is insane. It's like the city requiring you to like have a space for your refrigerator or cow. Like, what public interest is there in doing that? That's your problem. You figure it out.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you'll hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines and we talk about what it means for the land development industry. Other times when you tune in, you're going to hear an interview style show where we have on someone associated with the land development industry and we dig into some topics that are of interest to them. Now, today I'm excited to have with me Aaron Lubeck. Aaron is a land planner and urban designer out of North Carolina. Aaron, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion, and I appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got a couple interesting topics that we're going to dig into here in just a little bit. But before we do that, I'd like to get into your background a little bit and how you got into land planning and urban design. Can you walk us through kind of your story and journey and how you got into it?
Yeah, it's one of the fascinating things about working in the field of incremental development is that everybody's got a weird origin story. Like I don't think anybody kind of did a traditional like MBA in real estate type path. And I came to it really through entrepreneurial stuff in the dot-com boom of 2001. I happened to work with, when I was in my 20s, a bunch of friends that were doing startup companies of varying successes, but really learned the hard knocks of business and, being reliable, offering a product, making sure things are win-win. And out of that came a lot of great opportunities, but ultimately was really looking for rootedness in place and, constantly traveling around helping people start companies was a lot of fun. But, eventually you push 30 and you want to, you're tired of being on a plane. So I got my GC license and with a partner, Alan Sprite and myself, put our phone number out there to rehab houses. And we very quickly became experts in historic restoration work. And so for about 10 years, we did nothing but restore historic homes here in Durham, North Carolina, where there was a ton of it to be done. And, kind of off and running from there. The last 10 years, I've been more into the new urbanist world and doing new homes design in kind of urbanist land planning, and then a lot of work in education and advocacy, but came to it through small business experience and then historic restoration, just being a general contractor.
Nice. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah. And you're right about the path. The path is always, it definitely tends to be unconventional with most people. You do get the stories of some of the people who do the, go up and they always knew they were going to be in real estate and they kind of go down that path. But it sure seems the majority is of people who, something happens along the way and it just points them in that direction and they get into it and everything. And so you mentioned the historic restoration that you did originally. And so was that purely residential homes that you were working on?
Almost exclusively. We did a couple of commercial projects that were fairly small, including our office building, which is right near downtown Durham, which for a time was the world's smallest LEED platinum building. It was 2,200 square feet. And this was in the days when barely anybody had done LEED yet. And I probably learned more of what not to do than to do. It was definitely like too small to do a LEED project on. But that was our office building for Trinity Design Build for years. And it's just a beautiful rehab of a 1-story old A&P grocery. But everything other than that has really been residential. And, people bifurcate into one or the other. They're different codes, they're different cadences. Certainly working with homeowners is different than working with sort of professional restaurateurs or whoever. And so almost all my work has been in housing, and that's kind of what my expertise has developed in.
Okay, nice. And so on the urban design side, what is it about urban design that makes you so passionate about it?
Yeah, it's kind of an urbanist theory of everything. There was a great article. I wish I could place it. We might be able to pull it up and share it here. But there was a great article a couple of years ago called the Housing Theory of Everything. And it's kind of a long form article that linked the vast majority of problems we're dealing with now all kind of have their root in housing. And if you can solve housing, you solve for affordability and you solve for sustainability and opportunity and young people getting a foothold and forming households and having kids and being happy and prideful, all that stuff. And I think on a slightly larger scale, urbanism, the same principles apply. And I know we're going to get kind of into sort of traditional design and modernism and the differences between it, but I think the same thing shows up for just urbanism in general is the traditional way of building cities. And so new urbanism, for people who aren't familiar with it, often get kind of have a negative first reaction, because when you describe what it is, it's like, oh, it's walkable stuff. It's beautiful architecture. It's mixed uses. It's like there's a coffee shop there. And everybody's like, whether you're in Des Moines or Durham, you're like, that's not new. Like the old
Right.
part of the city is that, like nothing's new about that. And they're not wrong. But you look at the way we used to build cities were just better. In my view, there are people who disagree with this, but I just think they're better. They look better. They're more inspiring. They're walkable. They take less energy. They're inspiring, that they have places that people are prideful of. And this is really universal across the country, whether you're in Iowa, North Carolina, or California. Cities evoke pride. And the corollary of this in kind of monolithic machine suburbs, everything's the same. Everything's built to climax condition. Nothing's different. There's no change. There's not really ability to take opportunity in movement or dynamicism. And those are just kind of antithetical to the American spirit, I think. And so, urbanism isn't for everybody. I've kind of come to learn, like, the suburbs work for a lot of people, and I don't think they're bad people or there's anything wrong with it. But the spirit of American kind of ethic, where things can change and people are always hustling and doing things and innovating, and new things come up, things die. You just see that in the city. I mean, that's what urbanism is about. And a lot of people, particularly young people, are just attracted to that. They just want to live in the city. So I think we're seeing more of it. There's clearly been a movement the last 20 years to urbanize. And I think as Gen Y and Gen Z are kind of taking the reins of this country over the next 5-10 years, I think we're going to continue to see it to accelerate.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned both sides of it, because it feels like when comments are made online, or somebody posts something taking a side on the importance of how we build some of these communities and make them walkable and everything, you do always have kind of the other side where it's like, I just want to live out in the country away from everybody.
Yeah.
And I think what some people don't understand is that people aren't saying, I mean, we're not saying that everybody needs to live here. It's like, it's, building that as an opportunity for people who are looking for the walkability and that, in the urban space and everything. But one thing I was going to mention too, is that I'm listening to an audiobook right now, and I'm drawing a blank, so I'm going to look here really fast, but I'm listening to an audiobook right now called The Anxious Generation.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if you've heard that or
Is
read it.
Is it Jonathan Haidt's book?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's, one of the things he mentions in the book, I'm not through it all the way yet, but it just is coming to mind here, is that he talks about how, as we've spread out, that we've had less, community and less,
Right.
less conversation with our neighbors. It's more common now to move into a neighborhood and not even talk to your neighbors necessarily, or maybe you talk to the neighbors right next to you, but you don't really talk to anybody else on the block or anything like that. So it's just, kind of interesting how that's all happened.
It is. And some of that's the land plan and some of that's the architecture. I mean, you look at a great writer, Kate Wagner, she just got married, so she changed her last name, but she was the purveyor of the blog McMansion Hell, where she takes a sort of ruthless design critique to these, kind of soulless 6,000 square foot mansions that are kind of everywhere in any town in America. But you see those, and you're right. The people have kind of created their private fiefdoms. And for non-Americans who come here, it's really weird. I mean, it's like everybody has a private park in their backyard. We think of that as normal. Like that's just like baseball. It's like that's everywhere. Everybody has a private bar in their house. Like that's weird, it's just how we live. But so we've become like these private little cities, and that's a whole fascinating study. The other thing that's really remarkable about modern development is that we've gotten rid of the front porch. Well, we've gotten rid of the whole like engagement of the street, where you could sit on your front porch in a semi-private space. You could read a book. You could kind of engage with the passerbys as much as you want. You could wave to people or not. But the front porch has disappeared, partially because appraisers and bankers value front porches at effectively $0. And so you end up with the McMansions with the foyer that's, tall, but basically is useless. And there's no ability to engage the street, which also kind of undermines that ability to create that community effect in a neighborhood. So all of these are sort of undermining, the community values that were largely how this country was built. It's shifted arguably, but people create community through their neighborhoods. They create it through civic institutions, through churches, whatever. But certainly the way we develop land and the way we've developed communities the last 70 years is antithetical to that. And honestly, probably gets worse every decade. And that's fueling a lot of the desire, particularly of young people, for urbanism. They just hit a wall where they grew up in it. And they're just like, God, I do not want that.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder. I was thinking about this coming into our conversation. I was thinking about how this changes over time, because I feel like, and it's kind of like what happened with COVID and everything, where people started they developed new habits, right? And breaking out of those habits is very challenging. Like if you started attending church online, or you started doing certain things
Yeah.
online, now getting back in person and changing back to the way it was before. And it made me wonder if solving this, or maybe getting more people back to that community feel and everything, is something that's going to have to happen generationally, like essentially with the next generation, build housing and stuff for them that gets
Yeah.
them to bring it back.
Yeah. There's no question that there's the younger generation is really interested. I think that it's almost like the elastic band stretches so far, then when it pops, it goes farther. I know I've certainly engaged with plenty of 20 somethings who are really interested in the idea of intentional communities, co-housing ish type places, which are, part of the market now, but really niche. And when you see co-housing locally, it's funny that I live near a college town where there's all sorts of demand for kind of interesting stuff. They always pitch themselves as, oh, we're going to have all price points. It's going to be a small community of 20 or 50 homes. We'll have all walks of people, all ages and all price points and so forth. And inevitably they end up as like 60 to 70-year-old. Here it's usually Quakers. Like, so with a mission of being very diverse, it ends up the exact opposite. Still, co-housing is really just one version of 1,000 opportunities for intentional communities. And I really think a future in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a huge explosion of intentional communities that can range from the writer Nabil Hamdi in the book Small Change talks about there's 5 types of communities. Let me see if I can remember them. There's communities of place, like Iowa, North Carolina, Durham, whatever. There's communities of culture, which could be nationalistic or whatever. Hey, this is Spanish people living together or whatever. There's communities of hobbies. Yoga enthusiasts can build 4 houses around a yoga studio and it's paradise. There's communities of practice where you could build a community around a podcast studio or an architecture studio or something that's shared. And then the last one's communities of resistance, which is, political advocacy groups or so forth. And with any of those, like, it's not hard to design a really amazing development, pretty small, admittedly, but that's designed around the very narrow practice that's specific to that community. And the only reason developers don't do that now is because no one's going to do that speculatively.
Right.
Like, you have to have the community aggregated in advance. And there's not been an effort to really do that, or tools, for a variety of reasons. But I think that's coming. And those will be really fascinating, amazing places. And to your point, they will serve the purpose of re-communiting
Yeah.
our community.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's, I think before we get into the 2 main topics we're going to dig into today, just really quick, can you talk a little bit about, or describe what you do at the Rocket Shop?
Yeah, so Rocket Shop, it does 3 things. We do land planning, design, and development consulting, and we're very small. We've got 3 people. My design partner, Jen Truman, went to NC State and studied civil engineering and architecture. And we've kind of got a unique model in that with my involvement with new urbanism, I'm really determined to provide a premium land plans and architecture for a non-premium price. And the reason is we're really catered to non-professional developers, of which I actually think is the majority of home building now, is from, teachers who build an ADU in the backyard, or somebody who inherited a half acre and don't know what they want to do with it, but they can build 6 houses. And so we do a lot of hand holding with kind of teaching people the basics and making sure they don't get kind of steamrolled by city politics and so forth. And we'll go through and kind of do schematic designs on these small parcels. Our project ends up usually 3 to 10 homes, some more, some less. and we'll do the construction drawings on those through kind of a unique model where we're partnered with Allison Ramsey Architects, which is out of Beaufort, South Carolina. For about 40 years has been developing a stock library of traditional Southern architecture. They vary a little bit, but for the most part, they're low country, Charleston, Savannah style stuff. And the benefit of that is that I can get, I don't know if it's okay to share the screen. I know some of this is podcast and some of it's a vlogcast, but I can show some examples here of beautiful, beautiful, high quality architecture that from a custom architect would probably be $30,000 to $50,000, and we can license those for $1,750 plus whatever customization needs to get done to them.
Yeah.
So this works really well for the small builder developer, particularly one who's building kind of a set of 3 or 4 similar homes. We can get them to permit drawings ready to break ground for a fraction of the cost of traditional architecture. And that's, on these small projects, that can be the difference between, breaking ground and not breaking ground.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. Groove's built around a map, but that map connects everything. You can prospect land, find ownership information, and see key parcel data right from the start. Then, when you talk to a landowner, add a note, upload documents, or drop in a photo, all tied to that parcel. Nothing gets lost in the shuffle. You can even bookmark parcels and organize them into folders to keep your research clean and easy to come back to. Once you're ready to turn a parcel or a few parcels into a deal, Groove's deal management tools let you track everything visually on the same map. No new files, no exporting data. It all lives in one place. Start your free trial today at letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah, I mean, if you, on this topic or any of the other topics we're going to get into, if you have anything you do want to pull up, but by all means, you can share it, and we'll, those who tune in on YouTube or on the Spotify app where we put the video out there, well, we are now going forward, they'll be able to see it, and we can describe for those who are just listening in.
Yeah, let me see. Let me see if I can't tell. Is this actually sharing right now or no?
Here you go. Let me get it up on the stage.
There we go.
There we are.
All right. So this is an example. So this is Allison Ramsey's website. It's AllisonRamseyArchitect.com. Everybody thinks like, oh, this must be some beautiful woman, Allison Ramsey. She sounds great. It's actually Bill Allison and Cooter Ramsey, who have worked together for years. Bill just actually is kind of rolling out of the business, I think. But for 40 years has been doing these stock plans. And so you can search these really easily. This is an example. We tend to do much smaller homes than this, but this is like a stock plan we're looking at that kind of clearly is a beach style house, right? Because that whole water could flow underneath it and it'd be fine. But we have a client who's looking at it on a really sloped lot here. And, these are all kind of the license to build is what people end up licensing for a one-off, or we have a lot of clients that will build 10 or 20 of the same homes. You can get an unlimited build license for a 2-year period that works for a lot of folks. And all of them have like a basic floor plan. To get more detailed stuff, you can do a study set or just we can engage with you. And then some of them have these 3D models, not all of them, but you just get a good feel for kind of what they look like. So again, this from scratch is 30, 50 grand. But they can, licensed, and then licensed from us is a lot less than that. And then we always have like minor adjustments like, oh, I want that porch to be bigger, or can we take out this closet and enlarge the master bathroom? All those are super simple to do. And it's great because I'm a builder designer. Like I don't have the training or eye to create something that's beautiful. I'm really good at fitting this on the site and fitting it to a localized zoning code that I know really well. And that's kind of my value add. I really like drawing the site plans, which are, you don't require any professional training to go do that. That's really just like, scales and survey, which every developer should know how to do. But it's great to partner with these guys who can, have plans like these that you can filter through and fit on any site and make work.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really interesting. I'm glad you shared that because I think I think it'll be interesting for those tuning in as well. I think just based on the time, we probably better get into our 2 topics.
Sure. Fire away.
Yeah. So the first one we were going to dig into was parking requirements. So I know this is something that in fact, the 2 main topics that I pulled, I actually went out and saw them on your website where you post articles on some of these topics. And so they were they're interesting. They're things that have come up before. I've seen a lot of people talking about them on LinkedIn and other places. And so really, I guess the first thing I wanted to, I guess, to get the conversation started on the parking requirement topic is, what are some of the challenges that developers face when it comes to parking requirements?
Yeah, and let me actually, if you could pull up the screen again, I'm going to try to
Yeah.
narrate this through, and I'll do a better job at kind of narrating what people are looking at if we're looking at a podcast. What we're looking at here, there's a great drawing that was, I believe, done from Alfred Twu, he used to be on city council in Berkeley, but is an amazing artist who does a lot of work with California YIMBY, trying to take these complex, wonky zoning issues that only a few people understand and really bring them to the commonality of Americans who don't understand. They're like, no, I have a car, I've got to park. Why would I want to repeal parking mandates? And so here he did this beautiful drawing that Parking Reform Network republished that showed in 3 dimensions how awful the various parking requirements are to the built environment. And where no parking is required, you see a beautiful 2-story cafe with like an office or shop or a residential over the top. Looks like the kind of street we all would love to be on, very comfortable and so forth. But once you go to 1 space per 250 square feet of restaurant, you end up with 2/3 of the lot is a parking lot. And it's kind of looks like a Taco Bell in the back of a parking lot. It's immediately uninspiring and placeless. Once you go to, well, I skipped one, 200 to 500 square feet is kind of like a corner strip mall you'd see all over Texas or LA. Also not comfortable or fun. You can get your nails done, but it's not inspiring. And at 1 space per 100 square feet, which is a lot of restaurants, and it is in Durham, in fact, you end up with like a little drive-through barista place. And that's all you can do because of the requirements. And so we did this one study in Durham. We had one of our supporters of the recent zoning reform in 2023. Durham was the first city to get rid of parking requirements through private petition. Generally, it's been cities, councils, or planning commissions that have been advocating for it, but here citizens have petitioned. And what we're looking at on the screen is about a 7,000 square foot glass, light industrial building. And, you see these all over America where this would be a great adaptive reuse building. Like this could be a cool restaurant, coffee shop, or whatever. And if you see it in the top left of the screen here, this is the 7,000 square foot building at 1 space per 100 square feet. That's the parking that's required for that building to be a coffee shop or restaurant.
Which is like most of the block.
Pretty much the whole block. It's
Yeah.
about 7 or 8 buildings, which happen to be historic in an old neighborhood. It's actually an old, predominantly historically African American neighborhood. And it's a lot of like really quaint, pretty cool historic buildings. Some of them certainly needing help, but just really the kind of stuff you want to keep. You don't want to lose these buildings. And so the idea that part of there's so much wrong with this, right? I mean, one, nobody's going to be able to buy 7 houses just to comply with the parking. You don't want to lose those houses. The impervious runoff, which is a really big deal in central North Carolina because we're growing so fast, our soils are bad and so forth. Really big deal because this is like, an extraordinary amount of impervious surface. And then at the end of the day, the whole reason this would be a cool coffee shop is that it's in the middle of a neighborhood. Well, once you park it like this, it's no longer in the middle of a neighborhood. It's in the middle of a parking lot. So it was amazing until very recently. Everybody who designed sites understood how detrimental parking requirements were to sites. They just ruined pretty much everything, particularly urban things. And anybody who didn't design sites didn't think parking mandates were a big deal. And so now more and more people are understanding this. And remarkably, when cities are proposing to get rid of these, they're finding almost no resistance. Like the idea that people defend parking requirements is proving to be just inaccurate. There's nobody to stand up and defend these things. So I think there's 5 states right now that are actually trying to eliminate parking requirements statewide. And functionally, because people who don't understand this need to park a car and I need to park a car. There's plenty of parking usually on streets or in areas. And still the private marketplace is going to provide parking when needed. You're not going to build a Chili's out in the country that if you can't park the cars to get there. So it doesn't change much, but it doesn't encumber these urban sites like it has been, which has been really detrimental to cities. I think those days are ending.
Yeah, and I wonder too. I've had I had Jack Rowe on the show. Oh, it's been a few weeks ago, but he talked about some of the parking and one of the clips that I posted out on social media, of course, we get we get people who comment on things, right? And they maybe have a different opinion. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. And I never did circle back with Jack and ask him, but like one of the comments that we got on one of those videos where he was talking about, reducing the number of required parking spaces for a building or a restaurant or something of that effect is a person commenting on it saying that they did this recently where they lived, and I don't remember the location, but now they have to constantly move their car or something because now they don't have a place to park.
Sure.
And maybe that's more for like places where people live versus restaurants and things like that. So
Sure.
I'm not sure how you speak to that.
So it's a great question. Most of the country, the vast majority of the country, has no shortage of parking. I live in the densest area of Durham, and anybody can park on the street pretty much any time. And we're under constant, parking demand from high school students and from Duke students, but it's just not that hard. So that's like 99% of America. I get it. If you live in Brooklyn, like parking
Right.
is a knife fight. And partially I would, backtrack to say, well, again, the reason Brooklyn is so in demand and so cool is because it has all these restaurants and all these things you can do because so many people live there, and you also have the best mass transit, in North America. So there are trade-offs to this, and it eventually you get to a point where people are paying for parking either as they need it or people sell spots like it's real estate, like in New York. So I get it that's traumatizing when people sort of have effectively an entitlement, and that entitlement is lost. That's going to create a backlash. But this happens in again, Manhattan once had 3 houses on it. Now it has more. Like, things change, and as things change, people sort of come up with new solutions to do those things. But the idea that parking is a constitutional right is insane.
Yeah.
And the best quote on it, gosh, I can't remember who it was from. It was from some developing country. Maybe it was in Spain, actually, which isn't really developing. But there was a mayor who said, like, the idea that I would require somebody to have space for their private vehicle is insane. It's like the city requiring you to like have a space for your refrigerator or cow. Like, what public interest is there in doing that? That's your problem. You figure it out.
Yeah. That's kind of where my head was at. It's like, well, you can always move. Like there's other places you could go where you can park your vehicle.
That's right. The country is there.
Yes,
Right.
yes, 100%. Do you know? I was curious about this, and I didn't find anything on it. But do you know where these parking requirements came from? Like,
it's a great question, and I've not been able to answer that. And because I think it would actually be really helpful to accelerate the inevitable demise of parking requirements, to have a name of the person who came up from this. I mean, they're long dead, presumably, but they, it's because there's no responsibility or person to tie this to. It sort of survives as a zombie regulation that nobody wants and nobody defends. They clearly, in Durham, they came in the 1960s. From what I could see, mostly they were implemented as part of LBJ did a whole model cities zoning code sort of expansion. Mostly it was, the overeducated Ivy League guys coming in and saying, we know more than you do. And they implemented technocratic zoning codes that were suburban in every way that, frankly, we're still dealing with today. I mean, you look at the zoning codes that you probably have today in your city, and they're pretty similar. The roots are clearly that 1969 generation of code. But I don't think there's anybody to specifically to call out that said, hey, I've got a great idea. And I wish there was, and I wish somebody would research it, but I've never seen it identified.
Yeah. Well, let's, anything else you want to add on the parking? Cause I know we have another topic we want to dig into, but I don't want to leave anything out that you might want to talk about as well.
No, I think that North Carolina has HB 369, which is proposed to eliminate parking mandates statewide. I believe we'll see, if not this year, in the next 2 or 3 years, a state completely ban planners from mandating off-street car parking statewide. That's going to happen. It's bipartisan in North Carolina, which is a really good sign, and it's already showed up in a couple copycat bills. So keep an eye on these. And for those of you who, appreciate good land planning, walkable communities, really the homeowners and property owners guiding what their developments look like, and not some sort of distal planner or politician, this is really critical. I mean, I think this is one of the most transformational bills we'll see. And I do think in 10 years, this will be law nationwide.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a topic that I wasn't super familiar with until starting to have some of these conversations. I just didn't pay that much attention to it. And But yeah, having these conversations has made me more aware for sure. All right. Well, the next thing that we wanted to dig into was, modern versus traditional development. And I know this is something that this is one thing I have noticed. So I've noticed the whole modern movement, and I think this also involves just architecture and really everything. And a lot of things where you'll see the photo of what a city used to look like and then what it looks
Yeah,
like now. And you're like, why can't we have what we used to have?
right.
Like, why did we switch to this? And so I guess maybe to start with, can you explain the difference between modern and traditional development?
Yeah, I can. There's I kind of break this into three different versions of modernist versus traditional. The most obvious one is architecture. So what do the buildings look like? And I want to talk a little bit about modernist land planning and modernist development strategies because I think they're both relevant as well. So modernist architecture really started out of the Bauhaus movement in Germany in the 1920s and 30s, where the talent from that movement, as a function of World War II, migrated to the United States, really took over architecture pedagogy, and still to this day, the architecture schools in North America are completely dominated by modernist training. There's probably only two, maybe three colleges you could go to and really study traditional architecture. Notre Dame is really the flagship at it, cream of the crop, amazing architecture school. Miami, to a lesser extent, does the kind of cross pollination of styles. Andrews University in Michigan, and maybe a couple others, but everything else is modernism. And modernism is first and foremost a rejection of traditionalism. It sought to remove all the ornament and art that we saw in architecture. Many of us think that's kind of what we like about our old cities, that they had things that were interesting to look at, that our buildings were canvas for amazing, ambitious artists who built these buildings that were different, and everything was place based. You can see styles that are unique to Chicago, styles that are unique to Savannah, and so forth, and they give people that pride. Modernism seeks to remove that ornament and keep it clean line and effectively placeless. You'd also see, what was the other things I was going to say? Everything is very kind of self-centered in modernism. It's sort of rejecting of context. So, and when you get into the land planning ideas, modernist land planning is this Euclidean separation, rich people over here, poor people over there, commercial stuff here, industry there, where traditionally these were all together, mixed together in a city where you could walk to things and so forth. So the thing I would close on that is there's at its worst, modernist ethic teaches kids and students to reject the past. Reject everything that's been taught till now is plagiarism. If you try to copy what was already done, you're copycatting. You need to create a new time. All the buildings need to be statement based, and we're creating a future moving forward. And you can kind of get the appeal of that, but what it ends up doing is like, you know what, we learned a lot over the last 1,000 years that actually had some things that are useful. And to reject that wholeheartedly results in a world that it's pretty hard to screw up traditional architecture. We tell this to our non-professional clients, like stick with proportions and follow some rules and make sure your roof isn't like a butterfly or whatever. It's easy, and it's hard to make a building look bad. But modernism is like 9 out of 10 modernist homes I see are just bad. I mean, there is some good ones, and when they're done well, they're pretty amazing. But like, it's just bad, partially because, again, they're rejecting what we learned over the last 1,000 years.
Yeah, I was thinking back to many years ago when I was in college. I went to University of Iowa in Iowa City, and
Yes.
you look, when you walk on the campus and you see some of those old buildings that were originally
Yeah.
built there, and the pillars and like all of the small design things that you see in all of them, and then you get to the other side of campus and you start to see some of the newer buildings and
Yeah.
all the straight lines. There's like no, it's like they're trying to be overly fancy about it, but at the end of the day, there's like no, they're just straight lines. It's just
Yeah.
really, you can just see such a difference in those
And they're
old.
cold.
Yeah,
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 they don't hold up well too. I mean, there's all sorts of examples of brutalist architecture just like not standing the test of time very well. And some of the best examples are like Boston City Hall, or actually Harvard's Graduate School of Design is often put forth as like a weird building that, a lot of modernism is cool for 3 years. And then it's just like,
yeah.
it's not comfortable, where traditional architecture really does stand the test of time. And most universities, particularly the older ones, have that quad, and the land planning is traditional and the architecture is traditional. And it's beautiful. And the kids who go there, like, remember things about it. And, the style of Wash U is different than the style of Duke. And it becomes part of who you are, where modernism is sort of placeless. So the glass, library at one university is the same as the glass library at another. And it just doesn't have any pride evoked with it. And we used to joke, I did a tweet not that long ago that was the grand irony of where, the pedagogy of architecture training is really bad. Invariably, the ugliest building on most campuses is the architecture school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yep.
So you mentioned that, people maybe not wanting to recreate something that's already been created. So wanting to do something different as maybe one of the factors, but why do you think developers are not going back to traditional up to this point? Why do you think they're not doing that?
Well, so it's a great question. There's a lot of reasons. I think the financialization of the industry has really been not helpful to doing better, slower development. I think the lack of training in architecture schools and development schools to understand this is a real thing. New urbanism basically has the right ideas and the right values, and you can go through the Charter of New Urbanism and read through it, and you'll be like, yeah, that we do need to do more of that. This does make sense, but those values have not really sunk their teeth into planning schools and architecture schools and even development programs. And so the default setting, the easy button for development in America is, greenfield development on the edge of the town, building the same home over and over again, use separated, non-mixed use, residential code, simple stuff. And that's just the machine is built to do that. And it's harder to do a mixed use walkable community with great architecture. It's very, very few people are willing to do that. And the model is different. The financing for it's very different, but just even the commitment, there's a lot of very successful land developers who lock up land, build it all at once, sell out in, 3 years. If you look at the great traditional neighborhoods, Southern Village, Ion, Seaside, Rosemary Beach, we could go Newtown, St. Charles, and St. Louis. These are 25-year build outs, maybe longer. Some of them are 50. So you have to take somebody who's in their 30s who commits their entire life to this. And that's just a rare breed. I mean, we on a different podcast, we went through and trying to name some of these guys. You'll be lucky to get to 10 who are town founders who have this ethic. You're not going to get to 20. I mean, there's that few that do it. And, and it's tough because where are you going to get a lender to buy in for 10, 20 years? Like, they just don't think that long anymore. So the short termism of the industry and the risk aversion towards doing things different and the consolidation of capital has been harmful to traditional building and accelerative of monolithic suburban, mediocrity.
Do you think it's also an issue right now that maybe we don't have enough skilled like craftsmen who understand how to do that? Or is that something you think is going to come back and kind of backfill?
I have not found that a problem. And partially is because when we look at a lot of the new urbanist homes, they're not, I'm supposed to be on a podcast with a really talented guy, Ruben Hansen, who does the Aesthetic City. He's got a great YouTube channel, and he's Dutch, and he very much comes from the very old school, beautiful European stuff that like we barely have here in America. Mm-hmm. Most of the new urban stuff is still stick framed. It still uses hardy siding. It's all using the same materials, which is one of the reasons many reasons it works better than modernism. These don't require special tradespeople. And if you got a pretty good mason and you got a pretty good siding guy, it requires a developer or builder who sort of gets it, maybe a little bit more than the track builder, but it's not rocket science. I mean, that again, that's the beauty of traditional building is that, yes, we're not doing wood siding anymore. We're doing hardy, but it goes on the same way. And it's just a matter of proportions, big windows, good design that in my experience, I have found the trade skill not to be a huge hindrance.
Okay. How about the trades when it comes to maybe some of more of the handcrafted like design on some of them? Maybe that's maybe some of that stuff today is not even done by hand anymore, but it feels like in the past it was like you'd have to find somebody that was really good at creating some of the stuff that you'd see at the top of buildings and so on?
Yeah, some of like the stonework or the plaster molding and
Yeah.
so forth. Those skills really are hard to find. There's no question. And there's a lot of like green shoots of people doing interesting stuff. I don't know him well, but the guy doing Monumental Labs is trying to do like scalable ornament as a nationwide company. It's sort of fascinating. There's a good friend of mine who we're publishing now at the nonprofit digital magazine I have at Southern Urbanism. Austin Tennell is an extraordinary builder out of Oklahoma, and he's Build Culture is a big brand online and YouTube, and he has a podcast and he does a huge Instagram following. But you should have Austin on or invite him on. He's a brilliant guy, and he's a master at mass wall masonry, which is building the exterior walls out of brick, structural brick, rather than just veneer brick, which is almost unheard of for residential homes now. But what they've been able to build in Oklahoma is absolutely stunning. I mean, they're just beautiful, beautiful buildings. And now he's getting into development, doing his first project of 15 or so really amazing all brick townhomes in a very dense format. So they're out there, and he kind of learned the art of masonry. And here pretty much every mason I've talked to is Hispanic and sort of a production laborer. Austin came to it he was a CPA at Deloitte, I think, and became a mason and learned how to do all these creative things with brick. And you can look at his products. They're just amazing. So they're out there. They're just, locally, sometimes it's hard to find. And sometimes you have guys who want to do better. They just need to meet a developer who's like, hey, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
You bring pictures to him. I want to do this. Can you do this? What would you need to, what has to change for you to be able to do this?
Yeah, I'll definitely have to reach out to him. So we're at 40 minutes here. So I'd like to shift into the last segment of the show,
Sure.
the lightning round. So I've got a few questions for you here. Just interested in getting your quick thought on each of these. So first one, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting out in urban design?
Yeah, same goes for urban design or urban development, is that everybody in this industry has to draw. Like if you don't know how to draw, you are just trying to live your life with handcuffs on. And I teach people how to draw. And the reason I'm good at teaching people how to draw is that I'm not good at drawing. Like you don't have to be good at it, but the job is just constantly looking at land or looking at things that don't work and making them work. And 90% of that is sketching. And it's just figuring things out like a SAT question. Once you start sketching it on paper and working through iterative process of solving things, you're just better at what you do. And then you don't have to call an architect for every time you have an idea. Anybody young, I would say, get a sketchbook, draw for an hour a day, and just get comfortable with it.
All right, next one. What's a common mistake land developers make when trying to shift from modern to traditional design?
It's a great question. I think not understanding that traditional design is actually about the spaces between. In modern architecture, a traditional suburban form, the space outside your building is basically irrelevant, or it's an afterthought. Like people who are designing it, they care about the house, what your front yard is, they don't care, the side yard, how it relates to the community is an afterthought. And in urban design, it's really, that's all it's about is the space. It's mostly a landscape architect driven thing. And you can see this best by doing, it's really fun to draw Nolli maps, which are Nolli. And it was an Italian land planner from years ago, which is literally just taking a Google map of the built environment wherever you are and drawing black boxes over the buildings. That's it. The whole trace is, you don't draw streets, you don't draw trees, just the buildings, because you can start to see how the buildings form the space that's special and makes you feel a certain way. So in urban design, that's 100% what it's about. And in modern design, it doesn't matter.
Gotcha. All right. What trend in urban development and design excites you the most right now?
Yeah, I've been super enthusiastic about the growth of the YIMBY movement. I know it's not without controversy, but they're the ones who are the young, pissed off people in California who were kind of sold a bag of goods by people who were telling them they need it's young people who didn't have housing who were convinced they needed to yell at builders for being the problem, who after about 40 years of that said, you know what, we still don't have a house, so we're going to go with these guys now. And that's the origin of it, which is now a nationwide movement. It's mostly young people who are kind of taking the reins, and I think more and more of them are entering politics and building, and it's exciting to see. And they're getting, the best thing they're doing is that they are guardrailing bad faith NIMBYism faster than anybody thought. And over the next 5 years, I think they're going to be ascendant and kind of be the prime mover in this industry.
Cool. I hadn't heard of that, so I'm gonna have to check that out. If you could give a piece of advice to leaders who are shaping urban policies, what would that be?
Depoliticize housing. Yeah, it's harder to do, and the bluer the city, the worse it is. But it's been clear to me, as somebody been in practice for 20 years and who has seen roughly in that time, politics decided that affordable housing was really important and needed to be politicized. I think the results are overwhelming at this point, that that's done nothing but harm. And we would have been better off had we not done that. And it's a really big ask of politics, most of them who ran on a platform of affordable housing and housing is important, all these things, to then ask them to basically relinquish the powers that they have. But I think that's what needs to happen. And the faster it can be done, the better for America.
All right, last one. If you weren't doing urban design or land planning, what career path would you be on?
That's a tough question. When I was transitioning from being a restoration contractor to kind of the world of new urbanism, I taught for 5 years at Duke University, and it was a great joy of my life. I wrote a book called Green Restorations, which was kind of about how historic preservation and green building dovetailed with each other, and in many ways how they didn't. And the dean of the Nicholas School for the Environment invited me to teach. And that was a great honor. Got to teach master's students there of building science and so forth. And loved teaching. It was so different than building because it's sort of like non-risk bearing. The change agency is not as obvious, but we got to, work with really brilliant 20-somethings. And that was a great joy. So I might go back to teaching.
All right. Nice. Well, what's the best way for people to connect with you, learn more about your company, and everything like that?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. Our design site is at rocketshopnc.com, and we're fairly local to North Carolina, but for the right people, we're always willing to work and potentially look at land planning and design work. And we really do cater to that small builder developer and often the non-professional builder developer who's doing these small projects. And then for the advocacy side, where I'm doing writing, there's the digital magazine where we're publishing Kobe Lefkowitz, who's the author of Building Optimism, phenomenal new book, and publishing Austin Tennell from Build Culture. That's over at southernurbanism.org. And then my own blog where I soapbox about whatever housing thing is bothering me or inspiring me is just my name at aaronlubeck.com.
Perfect. So I'll throw all of those links on the show notes page. So those of you listening in, if you look down in the description, you'll see a link there to the show notes page. And on the show notes page will be all of those links. So you can check those out. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. And Aaron, really appreciate you hopping on. I mean, normally we don't go this long, but it was just such a great conversation. I couldn't stop it. We had to keep going and finish and get through our topics and stuff. So I know everybody's going to enjoy listening back to this. Or those of you who are listening right now, thank you for sticking with us for all this.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks. And for those of you listening in, we'll talk to you all next week.